Morning. Afternoon. I want to start out by playing a game with everybody. It's a pretty simple game. It's called Pick a Child. All right, pretty simple. And you can pick one child. You can pick two. You can pick them all. You don't have to pick any, and for whatever reason, all right? Now, that is exactly how I was plucked from the foster care system. All right? Now, that is not where my story began, and it didn't end there either. My story really began much like everybody else's first memory. For me, I was a toddler, you know, running around doing what toddlers do. I don't know how many parents are in the audience, but, you know, toddlers can be energetic, loud. My mom was one of those mothers that didn't like energetic, loud children, so she often came into the room with a belt in hand swinging. This one time she slipped and the buckle came out and hit me, so of course, what am I going to do? Cry, right? So I cried and I cried and I cried, and of course, because I was crying, I was locked in the room for the night. And because I was locked in the room for the evening, dinner was not on the menu. So fast forward a couple years later, the courts felt it necessary to take me from my mother and give me to my father, who remarried, and his new wife had a couple kids. So I moved with them, and so now I'm in my second home by the time I'm 5 years old, and there I had a new brother and a new sister, both older than me, and they liked to sexually abuse me. And my new mother, my stepmother, she liked to play this little game where she would take something and hide it and then blame me for losing it. Eventually, I told somebody, and literally the next day, I was stood in the kitchen by my stepmother, and I was told that I was leaving. Ironically enough, looking back, I had nothing in my brain. Nothing entered my brain. My mouth was speechless, which, if anybody knows me, that's pretty rare. So off I went to my first foster home with only a couple keepsakes and the clothes on my back. So I'm at my first foster home, and it was a nice enough older couple. Unfortunately, because of how energetic I was, I think because of their age, I was a little too much to handle for them, which, okay. So a little while later, off to my second foster home I went. I'm now 6 years old. At my second foster home, I went there with nothing but the clothes on my back. So I show up at my second foster home, and I had an older brother there, and he liked to put me on his shoulders, which is fun, but then he took me out into the woods and left me there. Ironically, I don't understand why he couldn't think I could just listen to his footsteps and follow him back, right? So I followed him back, and of course, I told. Well, later on that day, I actually woke up in the hospital not knowing what was going on. And this nice lady leaned over me and told me that I was going to leave with this nice couple. So off I left to my next foster home. And I went there, and I had a couple younger sisters there. And I played with these sisters like the only way that I, to this point, knew how to play with my siblings. So eventually, obviously, we were caught. My two younger sisters went running and screaming. I just laid there confused. I didn't understand what was going on. I would imagine, because of all the adults in the audience, some of you are parents. Naturally, off to another foster home I went. Makes sense. So now I'm 7 years old, and I'm asking myself, why? What's going on? Is there something wrong with me? do I look funny? Do I smell funny? What I don't understand. I'm becoming a little bit angry, a little bit isolated. 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old. I'm in 5 more homes and 6 more schools. All right? By the time I'm a 10-year-old kid, and yes, a 10-year-old is still a kid. By the time I'm 10 years old, I am angry at the world, at everybody. At this point in time, I had no idea who I was. 10 years old, no clue. My last foster mother, brilliant lady, Mrs. Ladd, miss her to this day. She had this uncanny ability to kind of just pull me out of that life of hell and put me into a different situation so I could observe things differently and look at things differently. There was a point in time when I was at her house and she opened up her back door and I saw a swing set out back and she goes, "You want to go swing?" Most 10-year-olds, what would they do, right? They run right out, swing away, go play out in the backyard. I just stood there and looked at her and asked her why. The reason for this is because I'm bouncing around to house, and all of the things that I went through made a 10-year-old child look at life in a big picture sense. I can honestly say, looking back at 10 years old, I was self-actualized at that point, even though I wasn't fully developed, right? So now I'm almost 11, and I'm getting adopted. Getting adopted, right? I'm going home with my new family, and I found out that I have a brother there. Like, oh, great. So I show up at the house. It didn't take long. A few months into me moving in, my adopted brother started forcing himself into my bedroom. It didn't take long for me to put a stop to that, because now I'm a teenager. And as I'm growing up into my teens, after all of those multiple placements, without nothing but the clothes on my back, no keepsakes, I had no clue who I was. I had no identity. I had no community that I could establish my roots in. Christmases, no. Birthday parties, no. You moved around too much, all right? So I'm still growing up in my teens. I'm trying to establish those relationships that every teenager does, right? With their parents, with friends, girlfriend, boyfriend. You have teachers, doctors. All those relationships that I formed, I never felt fully part of that relationship. I always kept people at a distance. And the reason for that is because I didn't have me to offer into this relationship. There was nothing of me. I had no sense of me, where I came from. So while I'm having these discussions with my friends and my doctor and everything like that, because I didn't feel as though I wanted to tell things, because it doesn't take long to realize that sharing your story comes with a stigma, a bad stigma. So you stop telling your story, and you start making up lies so you fit in. Now I'm an adult. What is it like for an adult that went through all those multiple placements, went through all that abuse? For an adult, I have a job, right? I have a job. I have a wonderful marriage, amazing kids. You know, there's other relationships, other organizations that I belong to and I take part in. But deep down, inside, I don't feel like I'm a part of anything other than my marriage, other than my family, because that's the one thing I always strive to obtain, right? My own family. It wasn't until I was 4 or 5 years into my marriage that I started realizing what love actually was. So, to really get the grips on how big of an issue this really is, what I want to do is I want to do a little survey with the audience. I want everybody in the audience to raise your hand if you know anybody that's adopted or spent any time in the foster care. Go ahead, raise your hand, and keep your hand up. I also want you to raise your hand if you know anybody that has adopted anyone or fostered anyone. Keep your hands up. Now, everyone in the audience, please look around. This is not just an issue that affects the children. This is an issue that affects an entire community. So as I'm growing up, I'm pondering these questions. I'm wondering, what is going on? What can I do? So I actually started interviewing thousands of adoptees and foster care kids and parents who fostered and adopted. And I realized that there's four main questions that come up. One is, who do I look like? What were the circumstances surrounding everything? Do I have any brothers and sisters? And what's my medical background? These are the four main questions. Now, as I'm growing up, because I had no idea who I was, I had a very eclectic background of employment, right? I did a little bit of everything. I went through nursing school. I went through asbestos handling school. I was a cook for a long time. I worked in a printing press factory. I worked in a metallurgy foundry. Finally, the passion started building up inside me too big. And I actually walked out of my last job and put myself back into school at 45 years old. So I'm back into school, right here at Onondaga Community College. And I acquired this amazing professor. Her name is Tina May. And she had this uncanny ability to pull the passion right out of me. Just pulled it right out of me. And she allowed me to ask those deep questions that nobody or everybody else was afraid to ask. And it didn't take me long between internships and different classes to realize where the gaps in services were and what I could do to help. So I came up with this idea of a nonprofit organization. And this idea is more of a multidisciplinary approach towards helping displaced children. And this isn't just the foster care system. This is human trafficking victims. And the list goes on and on. There's a plethora of reasons why children are displaced. Now, in my experience, you've heard that there were many multiple placements. In Syracuse, New York, and Central New York, the average is 6 homes in 2 years in the foster care system. According to the Government Bureau of Statistics, they release this report every year. It's called an AFCARS report. It's about adoption and foster care statistics. In 2017, we had 690,000 individual placements. Let that soak in a second. Almost 700,000 displaced children. That's an issue. And I don't think we're doing enough to help these children establish roots in a community. We have wonderful programs out there that help children find temporary placements. That's all fine. We need that. We need emergency placements. We need these programs. But we're not doing enough to help these children establish roots in the communities that they're growing up in. For me, having no sense of identity, having no sense of self, really kept me from being able to do a lot that I wanted to do. Thankfully and fortunately, my adopted parents were the type of parents who were like, get out of here. Go make your own mistakes. Figure it out. So I did everything I could, everything I could. Not everybody has that choice, though. There's plenty of children that age out of the system with not enough aging out programs to help them along the way, especially with mental health. So I developed an idea for a nonprofit organization that approaches the foster care system and the adoption system a little differently. Has anybody in the audience been to a major medical center where it's pretty much a one-stop shop? You have everything right there, right? You can even have your private doctor there, ENTs, cardiologists, et cetera, et cetera. My vision is pretty much the same thing, but for displaced children. Instead of having a child go from one center to another center, to a temporary, to a permanent, to a different temporary, possibly even back with the original parents. Hopping around all that time and all those multiple placements really severs any chance for a child to truly develop properly. Now, unless there's a good support system for them, they're never going to achieve that sense of identity we all try to achieve. We all try to figure out who we are, right? We all try on different hats. We all try out different things. We experiment. We do stupid things. We've all done it. I've done it, that's for sure. So I think we need to do better at eliminating these multiple placements and really help children establish roots in a community that they're growing up in. And my center is more for, you're going to have the police there. You're going to have CPS caseworkers there. You're going to have a medical facility right there. So this child doesn't have to go here. This child doesn't have to go there to the police, over here to a psychologist, over here to a therapist. And with this idea, hopefully, it'll set a gold standard and show counties across the country that this is how it should be done. We need to find better ways and better programs to help these children establish an identity and establish roots in a community. And in that process, we also need to help the community understand what it takes to handle a child with a mental health issue. So if we do both of those, what will happen in the long run is a community and the children that are establishing roots in those communities will grow and learn together and not individually. So children actually feel like they're a part of something. Now, that brings us back to this picture. All right. I told you before that's how I was picked from the foster care system. The way that this was done, and my adopted mom was sitting at a desk in Madison County, going like this, flipping through binders, plural, of pictures of kids. And she went, "Ooh, what's his name?" And that was me. So I was lucky. I was very, very lucky. And there's many, many, many children that do not have that luck. And just a show of hands, what I would like to know is, who picked picture number 2? Show of hands, anyone? I appreciate that. Number 2 is top middle, sorry. That little redhead on the left up there, that's me, so I appreciate whoever picked me. All right. One more, bottom right picture. Who picked that one? Raise a hand. Bottom right picture. I really, really, really appreciate that because that's my wife, and she's also adopted. All right, and the gentleman that adopted me is also adopted. So it's kind of neat, I told my kids growing up, you're part of a brand new bloodline, do you know that? And they liked it. So, with everything that I've said tonight, I really believe that we can do better. I think that we really need to do much better in helping our kids establish roots in a community. That being said, we are doing better. We have movements. We have the Me Too movement. We have the Time's Up movement. And most recently, we had the New York Child Victims Act get passed, which for someone like me that went through all that abuse and all those multiple placements, I am 48 years old. And everything that I've gone through, I can still sue for a reprieve. And in some cases, I can still sue for damages. Do you know what that does for a person that has gone through that, for their mentality? It gives them options. Options are key to helping a child establish themselves and an identity so they can learn and make those mistakes. We must do better.